In the autumn of 1415, rain poured relentlessly over the muddy fields of northern France, soaking the ground and setting the stage for one of history's most dramatic and unlikely victories. The Hundred Years' War had already been raging for decades between England and France, a bitter conflict fueled by claims to the French throne, territorial disputes, and a deep rivalry that stretched across generations. And in the midst of this centuries-long struggle came a single battle that would cement itself in legend: the Battle of Agincourt. Against overwhelming odds, an exhausted English army led by King Henry V managed to crush a much larger and better-equipped French force. How did this happen? The answer lies in a combination of luck, strategy, leadership, and one simple weapon that redefined medieval warfare: the English longbow. The story begins earlier in 1415, when the young Henry V, only 29 years old, and newly crowned, sought to prove his strength as a king and secure his claim over French lands. After sailing with his forces across the Channel, he laid siege to Harfleur, a French port city. The siege was long and grueling, and though the English eventually captured it, the victory came at a heavy cost. Dysentery and disease tore through Henry's army, killing many and leaving the survivors weak and weary. With winter approaching, the practical choice would have been to retreat to England and regroup. But Henry, bold and determined, decided instead to march his depleted forces across northern France toward the English stronghold at Calais. It was a dangerous gamble, one that would soon bring him face to face with the full might of the French nobility. As the English marched, the French gathered an army to intercept them. By the time the two forces met near the village of Agincourt on October 25, 1415, coincidentally the feast day of Saints Crispin and Crispinian, the contrast between them could not have been starker. The English army numbered only about 6,000 men, many of them sick, hungry, and exhausted. The French, on the other hand, fielded an army of roughly 20,000 to 30,000, including heavily armored knights, mounted cavalry, and noblemen eager for glory. On paper, it seemed like the English were marching straight into annihilation, but the battlefield itself told a different story. The ground between the two armies was a narrow strip of recently plowed farmland, bordered by dense woods on both sides. Days of rain had turned the soil into a quagmire, a sticky, muddy trap that would make movement slow and exhausting. For the French knights, clad head to toe in steel armor, this would prove disastrous. For the English longbowmen, lightly equipped and positioned behind wooden stakes driven into the ground, it was the perfect setup. Henry positioned his men carefully. He placed his heavily outnumbered men-at-arms in the center, flanked on both sides by ranks of longbowmen around 5,000 in total. These archers, many drawn from humble backgrounds, were the backbone of the English army. Armed with 6-foot-long yew bows capable of firing arrows at incredible speed and force, they could unleash a storm of deadly projectiles that pierced armor, killed horses, and sowed chaos in enemy ranks. Against traditional medieval tactics that relied on charges of mounted knights and hand-to-hand combat, the longbow was revolutionary. When the battle began, Henry ordered his archers to step forward and launch the first volley. Thousands of arrows whistled through the damp October air, raining down on the French knights and cavalry waiting to charge. The French, enraged, surged forward, but the muddy terrain worked against them. Horses stumbled, men slipped, and the charge lost momentum almost immediately. As they struggled through the mire, wave after wave of arrows fell upon them, cutting down men before they even reached the English lines. The noise was deafening, the screams of horses, the clash of armor, the cries of the wounded all echoing across the narrow field. Those French knights who did manage to reach the English front line were exhausted and disorganized. There they met a wall of English men-at-arms fighting desperately with swords, axes, and maces. Meanwhile, the longbowmen, having loosed most of their arrows, joined the melee as well, wielding mallets and knives to finish off the struggling French. The battlefield quickly became a slaughterhouse. The sheer press of French soldiers trapped in the narrow strip of land, combined with the sucking mud, meant that many knights could not even raise their weapons. Some suffocated under the weight of their own fallen comrades, crushed into the mud. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was clear. The French were being utterly destroyed. Despite their overwhelming numbers and superior equipment, they had walked straight into a deadly trap. Their reliance on traditional knightly charges and their arrogance in underestimating the English longbow sealed their fate. By the end of the day, thousands of French nobles and knights lay dead on the field, including some of the most prominent leaders of the French aristocracy. The English, by contrast, lost only a few hundred men, a staggering disparity that shocked all of Europe. The victory at Agincourt was not just a military triumph, it was a psychological and political one as well. Henry V, the young king who had risked everything, suddenly found himself hailed as a national hero. His reputation soared, and his claim to French lands seemed stronger than ever. For the French, meanwhile, the defeat was catastrophic. The cream of their nobility had been slaughtered in a single day, leaving the kingdom humiliated and weakened. The message was clear. The age of armored knights dominating the battlefield was coming to an end, replaced by the rise of common soldiers and new military technologies. But beyond the tactics and bloodshed, the Battle of Agincourt also became a story of inspiration, immortalized in literature and legend. Centuries later, William Shakespeare would dramatize the battle in his play Henry V, giving us the famous St. Crispin's Day speech, where Henry rouses his outnumbered troops with words of brotherhood and eternal glory. Whether Shakespeare's version was accurate or not, it captured the spirit of the moment, a band of weary soldiers defying impossible odds and emerging victorious against all expectations. The legacy of Agincourt has endured for over 600 years, not just as a military turning point, but as a symbol of determination, strategy, and the power of the underdog. It reminds us that numbers and strength alone do not decide battles' terrain. Tactics, leadership, and the will to fight can change everything. The longbow, a weapon wielded by peasants and commoners, humbled the mightiest nobles of France and reshaped medieval warfare forever. As we look back on that muddy field in northern France, one cannot help but wonder what it must have felt like to stand among the English that day. Drenched in rain and mud, outnumbered 5-1, and yet somehow triumphing. The Battle of Agincourt remains one of the greatest military upsets in history, a moment when fortune, preparation, and human resilience collided to alter the course of a war. And that's the enduring power of Agincourt. It was not just a clash of armies, but a reminder that courage and cunning can topple even the mightiest of foes. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most legendary battles, make sure to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from the past, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. History is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered, and together we'll keep bringing them to light.